This episode is brought to you by our sponsor, the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control, which is currently introducing its new base membership. What is base membership? Well, it's the AAOMC's new free introductory membership type, designed to help educate doctors on myopia control and orthokeratology. Whether you are brand new, an experienced fitter searching for pearls, or someone who's dabbled in the past and ready to step up their game, AAOMC base membership can help, and it's free. So what do you have to lose? Go to orthokacademy.com, click on the practitioner button, and join us. Join the war against the myopia epidemic. Welcome back to the Corrected View podcast. My guest for this episode is Dr. Dwight Barnes, who wrote an article for our recent newsletter called Ortho-Keratology with Apprehensive Patients. Dwight, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
So the reason why I wanted to have you on the podcast was we get a lot of questions, whether I'm at a booth at a conference or through an email or from a previous follow-up on a podcast. And it seems that talking with patients about Ortho-K is a very sticky subject. And so I thought, why not have you on to talk about your article, why you wanted to write it, and if you have any advice to kind of help other fitters solve that whole paradigm. So let's start with what inspired you to want to write the article, first and foremost?
I think my main motivation was a lot of people do Ortho-K on a mix of both adults and children. In my practice, it's 95% children. In fact, most of the adults that I do Ortho-K on are either adults that have transferred into my care from another practice, or they're the parents of children that I'm doing myopia control on. We'll get the question, hey, can I do that too? And sure, I'm happy to do it. But we've never been a practice that really marketed Ortho-K to adults. I don't mind doing it. I'm just much more passionate about the myopia control aspects. So in a practice like mine, we're dealing with children all the time. And of course, the younger you start, the easier, the better the process works. If you start them younger, you're more likely to have a better control and keep their myopia to a lower level. So I realized pretty early on that you get the occasional brave kid that you throw anything at them and they're fine. But a lot of these children are really a bit anxious and unnerved by the whole process. They've almost always been a patient who's not worn contact lenses before. They've maybe worn glasses. And if we don't make a special effort to involve them, essentially what comes across is, well, I'm here because my parents told me I had to do this so I don't become too nearsighted. And so it can be a fearful process. And so over the course of years, fitting a lot of first-time patients with orthokeratology lenses and kind of reading their responses of how the process was going, I modified my technique a little bit. And what I realized is that, we'll see the young kids, 7 years old, 6 years old, and they're coming in for Ortho-K. And more often than not, it goes pretty well. So I thought this was a great opportunity to share some of the experience that I'd gotten in dealing with some of those patients. And it's not only the younger ones that are apprehensive. I mean, I've had 12-year-olds and 15-year-olds that were, but, dealing with children, they don't always express their fear. But you can kind of read their fear and then try to involve them in the process in a way that keeps them comfortable.
Yeah, recently we had a podcast that had Nate Benia-Warford on it, who has a pediatric only practice. And one of the things that we discussed in that podcast was the necessity to get information out of the kids that you wouldn't normally be able to get through just a standard set of questions. And I'm wondering if that plays a part into, because you have a section of your article called Get the Child's Buyin. So I was wondering how much of that enhanced communication do you feel is required to get that kid's buy-in?
Yeah. I think it certainly makes the process easier. Whether it's required or not, I don't know, but it makes the process a lot easier. If you've got a willing participant, and they can get excited about the thought of, even if they don't get into the myopia control aspect as much as their parents do, it can be exciting for a kid who's always worn glasses and been blurry when they don't, to get up, take some lenses out, and be functional with their vision in society. And so we can find out what resonates with them. If it's an older child, they may truly be concerned about myopia progression. But if it's a younger kid, they're 7, 8, 9 years old, they don't care about that, honestly, in most cases, but they do care about seeing better. And in many cases, they'd rather do this than wear glasses. And so I always try to, especially in the initial stages of a myopia control consult, when we're feeling things out and seeing how they are likely to do with Ortho-K and maybe putting some diagnostic lenses on, I always start it with a conversation with the child. Make sure they understand why they're in the office, what we're trying to accomplish, and then usually I'll just verbally walk them through the whole process. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that. It's going to kind of feel like this. And that way, there's no big surprises. You put a mold in Ortho-K lens in somebody's eye, and they don't understand what's going on, and they have this sensation of this awareness that strikes them as unusual. And that can cause fear. I wonder if this is how it's supposed to feel. I wonder if something's wrong with it. And I found that you really know what the sensation is that they're going to experience and why that sensation's there. Then when I put it in, they blink a couple times and look around. And in most cases, they say, okay, yeah, that seems about right.
Gotcha. So that's part of that whole communicating directly with the kid and walking through that process. But according to your article, you also do a fair amount of, I don't know how to put it, but it's like extra prep work that makes the patient more comfortable. Like you mentioned that you have pictures on the walls of your hallways of your practice that have kids who have done, Ortho-K at your practice. So as the kid is walking to the exam, they can see that these other kids around their same age have done it. So
totally.
Yeah,
it's a great it's a marketing strategy, but it's also great for patient comfort.
Mm-hmm.
So in our office, a lot of offices will brand their Ortho-K program a specific way. In our office, we call it Overnight Sight, which I stole with permission from Bill Steffen. So I'll throw out credit to him. But we like the name, and so the kids that go through it who do well, we call them overnight successes, right? So when they get to the point that they're wearing it successfully and we're accomplishing what we want to, and they're seeing well, we'll take a picture of them. Kind of at that point, they're considered a success. They've combed through it. They've got great vision. And we take all these pictures, and then we'll keep a selection of them up on the wall leading back to my exam rooms at any given time. And my goal is always to have a pretty diverse group in terms of age and gender and race. So kids are coming in and they see somebody who looks like them, right? And especially if they're on the younger end, they're saying, I'm only 7 years old. Can I do this? And they see a picture of a kid that looks about their age and who's smiling and proud of themselves for having done it. Because I really do find that we experience a lot of pride from these children when they do this thing that seemed difficult to start with. And, the first part of the accomplishment is just being able to let someone put the lens in their eye. Mm-hmm. Second part is then to learn to potentially do it themselves, or if they're very young, maybe with some assistance from a parent. And then the last part is, building that routine where they're wearing this lens every night and they're experiencing clear vision and it's obviously working the way that it's supposed to work. And yeah, we get some big smiles on the kids when we take those pictures. Always, of course, I ask permission. Is it okay if I take your picture? And occasionally, if they're a little older kid, they might be too cool for it. But most of the younger ones, I'll get a big smile. And, as soon as I mention, you've probably seen our pictures in the hallway, when the parent will make a comment, they were waiting for that. They were hoping to get up on the wall. So we rotate them in and out and try to make sure that when kids come in, occasionally on some of those visits, they see their own picture up on the wall.
It's great to have that experience for the patient to get that reinforcement as they're on their way to their exam and starting that whole process. But for other doctors, obviously not, you're going to have those patients, those kids who are just extremely resistant, or they're almost there, or there's just that one thing that needs to happen to convince them. And I was wondering, with your experience as a part of this process, like, what do you do with a kid who, like, you feel it, this is going to work, but things are not going, it's not a smooth part of the process. So what does it take? What is that extra layer? Maybe the kid doesn't like the way that the lens feels, or they're apprehensive to a point where they're resistant, but you really think you can make that work. So what do you do with an extremely difficult case?
There is such a thing as a child that's too difficult to fit, but most of them aren't. I would say if I had to name the most common stumbling block, it's the one you mentioned. It's just the comfort, right? The level of awareness these kids get when you put the lenses in, it's all over the place. And most of them have an awareness or an annoyance maybe from the lens. And then you get the occasional kid who, either their eyes are truly much more sensitive, or they've gotten themselves so worked up that in their mind maybe there's a bit more awareness than they think. And I guess my answer would be two-part. The first part is, if I can tell that their eye is tolerating it well, right? Their eye is nice and white and quiet. It's not red. The lens is sitting where it should be, and they're able to open their eye and keep their eye open, which is a big sign. If they can keep their eye open, they're not having a tremendous amount of discomfort, but they may not have let go of that apprehension yet. So appraise is a big part of that. If they start off, closing their eyes and blinking excessively and not really able to allow me to evaluate it, and then as they sit with it in, and then I see that they are looking around and their eyes are open, that's a great opportunity for me to jump in and say, hey, look at you. Your eyes are more open now. You're tolerating it better. You weren't sure you could do it, but you're doing this. Both of your eyes are open, and at that point, you can almost say you kind of already done it, gotten through that obstacle. And then it's a matter of the evaluation itself when they've got the lens on is fairly brief. So I can kind of be efficient and get through my evaluation and throw a bit more praise and congratulations to them along the way. And then get them to the point where we take it out. And I try not to leave the lenses in for a really long time in that initial evaluation, because there's just no need to. I take pictures and I'll go back and look at the pictures of the fluorescein patterns later. And I don't have to study it on their eye for a long period of time. But I think the other part is just that expectations we talked about. When I'm getting ready to put it in, what I'll generally do is, I'll already have the lens pulled, the diagnostic lens that I plan to use, and explain to them where the sensation comes from. And in my opinion, only some of it comes from the lens against the cornea. A lot of it comes from the lens against the underside of the eyelid. They're not used to blinking over something, and they're not a soft lens. They do have an edge. It's thin, but it's an edge, and it's rigid, right? So they blink their eye, they're blinking over the edge, and they can feel it. They move their eye underneath the lid, and the lens is on their eye, and they can feel it. And if they close their eye gently, like they're going to sleep, the sensation is much less. And then I always explain, and that works out pretty well because that's how you're going to wear them. They're not designed to wear during the day. So, I've explained that part to them already when we get ready to put the lens in. And then, once I've washed my hands, what I'll do is I'll show them with my hands exactly how I'm going to hold their eye open without actually having a lens on my finger. So they're not worried I'm going to put a lens in. I'll just say, hey, I don't even have a lens. I want you to look straight ahead, look at the mirror at the end of the room, keep both eyes open, and I'll show them, I'm going to hold your lower lid like this. I'm going to hold your upper lid like this. And I'm going to hold the lens just an inch or so from your eye, and I'm going to say, are you ready? And then you're going to say yes, and I'm going to put it on. And sometimes they'll ask, well, what are you going to do if I say no? And I'll say, well, I'm not going to put it on, but we're going to regroup, and I'm going to ask you again. We don't want to give up on it, right? But we'll get you ready. And for some patients who do have a high level of fear or apprehension, that feeling that they're in control goes a long ways. I'm not going to pry their lids open. I'm just going to hold their lids open. If you have to pry their lid open, then you got to get the kid more relaxed. They're looking all over the place. It's not going to go where it's supposed to go anyway. So they need to kind of be a willing participant and look straight ahead. And so when I go through that, and then once they kind of understand the process, then I'll get the lens and I'll put it on the tip of my finger and I'll get in position. And when they see that I'm telling the truth, I'm doing what I said I was going to do, having them look straight ahead and, are you ready? Yes, I put it in. And then that second eye, if the first eye goes well, the second eye goes a whole lot better. And I'll always kind of remind them, as soon as I put that first lens in, I'll say, okay, remember how I said it was going to feel, right? Blink, it's really weird, right? It's an odd sensation. And now close your eye gently. Don't squeeze it, just close it gently. And you can see, and some of them, when I've prepped them for how it's going to feel, they'll say, oh, this isn't as bad as you said. This isn't really much of anything. But even the ones that do, at least it's not a shock to them. They're seeing it feels about like what I said, and it does feel a little bit more comfortable once they close their eyes.
Right. So it's just a process of helping them feel more comfortable with the fact that this isn't like the worst thing ever, and that, you can get used to it. And kids, they're, resilient in the idea that they'll get used to something. And even if that's initial, apprehension and fear of it, once you get them working with it, then you can really bring them around to it.
Yeah. So I'm not opposed to using other tricks or techniques either. Distraction can be a really helpful thing. Sure. One of the things I'll tend to do is once we've got both of the lenses in, and I've kind of put the fluorescein in, and I've evaluated, and I'm getting ready to take it out, I'll usually say, hey, you want to see something pretty cool? and I'll bring them over to the mirror, the acuity mirror, and I got a little cobalt blue pen light, just like the blue light on the slit lamp, and I'll shine that and let them look in the mirror, and it's a pretty cool thing to see your eyes with the little green rings for the Ortho-K pattern.
Right. Yeah.
And they've never seen that, and they didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know the stuff I put in glows under the blue light, and that distraction, you get a little smile, and they think it's pretty cool, and the parents think it's pretty cool. Sometimes they take a picture. It's a nice little photo op for them. My kid went in for their Ortho-K evaluation. I got this cool picture. Their eyes look glowing green and what have you. And then, then they've kind of let their guard down a little bit, and the rest of it's easy. It's just time to take the lenses out and talk to them a little bit.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, that's such a great idea, because what kid isn't going to love to see that their eyes are glowing?
Yeah.
So definitely. And so let me ask you this then. Obviously, if you want to work with kids, you got to be good with kids. Is that something that you were naturally just good at from the start, or is it something that you had to learn to get better at? And if so, how did you do that?
I guess there's two things involved. I do not know if I would have been good with kids before I had kids.
Okay.
I was an eye doctor before I had kids, but I did not do Ortho-K before I had kids. I'd already had kids, and I started doing Ortho-K, and you learn a little something from dealing with your kids and dealing with your kids at their best and dealing with them at their worst, right? You definitely learn something. But I think the other part of it is, and my office team would tell you this too, I'm a playful guy. I'm not a very serious person in the office unless I have to deliver some serious news. I like to joke around. I like to, wear my fun socks with dogs on them, or, whatever, tacos on them, whatever, and kids will make comments. And, I keep some Lego figures in the room, and they're always, because my son used to be into Legos, and now he's not. So I grab those, and I just have them kind of placed around the room, and they'll ask or notice there's a new one there that wasn't there last time they came in. I can at the same time show the parents that I have confidence in what I'm doing while still being a little bit goofy with the kids. And I think that helps a little bit there too, just kind of put them at ease.
Right. So what you're saying is like a more lighthearted approach, and don't have such a serious exterior, and acknowledge the fact that, because one of the things that you said in your article is children are smart and they can understand the orthokeratology process quite well. And something reminded my mom used to say about kids. She said, kids are short, they're not stupid. And I feel like if you treat a child like, hey, I trust that you can understand what this is, and I'm going to do my best to explain this to you. So I think, definitely treating that child with a certain level of attention that they can pick up on it. Like, kids are smart. They will be able to pick up on what you're trying to explain to them. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And, and they ask questions. They ask great questions. When they come in for a follow-up, the first thing I always pull up before I even look at their acuity or talk to them, I pull up their topography patterns, right? And they know I'm looking at those. They're wondering what the red means versus the blue and what they mean. And it's a great opportunity to say, well, we want it to sit well-centered. And fortunately it is. It looks well-centered with that little red circle that goes around. That's really good. That's what we want to see. Or if it's not perfectly centered, say, well, that's why your left eye doesn't see as well as your right. That's my job to fix that.
Gotcha.
You didn't do anything wrong putting it in. You didn't put it in off-center. I just need to adjust the design a little bit. So I'm going to work on that and try to get it to be just as clear as your right eye. So yeah, I'm always amazed by the questions they ask.
What other kind of questions do you get?
Well, the big one is, how does it work? Which I actually really love the question, how it works, because maybe this kind of dovetails into my other comment I was going to make is parents are apprehensive too. If they wear contacts, maybe not, but in some cases, like, they're terrified their child is getting more nearsighted. They're very nearsighted. They want to do something, but they're not quite comfortable with the idea of a contact lens in a young child. And one of the answers that I always tell them that seems to put them at ease, and it's absolutely truthful, is in their head, they think that this is a hard lens designed to mash their cornea flat. And mash is not a word that we use.
Right.
And the thing I explain to them, and I explain it to the child as well, is this is not a mechanical process. This is a hydraulic process. There's a layer of tears underneath that lens, between the lens and your eye, everywhere around. And if there wasn't, it'd be a bad fit. We'd have to adjust it. We'd see, corneal irritation. That tear layer is thicker in some places and it's thinner in other places, and it creates a hydraulic force. And so I don't need to go into way more detail, but the idea that it is a hydraulic, not a mechanical force, is comforting to them, and I'm in a really educated area. Parents of the kids coming in and the kids themselves, I mean, they're really smart. They do well in school. They've got high paying jobs, and they can all understand those concepts. It might be different in some areas, but when I explain that, they kind of understand, okay, it's not just kind of mashing the eye flat. It's a little more complicated, and it feels and seems safer to them on that.
Yeah, I got to imagine that's got to be really fascinating to a kid who, maybe she's really into science, or, kid who's into trucks, or, a kid who's really into, like I knew a kid who, when she was younger, was really into like making like goop, like, God, what was that stuff called? It was like you could get a kit for it and you could make this like paste or goop, and you could change colors with it, and you could change like the way the form and consistency of it. It was like doing a little science experiment.
Sure.
And so I imagine that's got to be really fascinating to a kid who's already into, science and taking things apart, or, kids are naturally curious anyway. So I have to imagine they'll have lots of questions. So I'm excited to hear that that's, an important part of your process, is involving them in that and answering those questions. I think that's really cool.
Sure. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I always start by engaging the child, because I don't want the child to be bored. It's all about them at that visit. I mean, they're the whole reason that they're there, is the child. So the last thing I want to do is be turning my back to them and talking to their parents. I always face the child. And then, of course, if something's directed specifically to the parent, I'll turn and I'll say that to them. And I already know that at the end of the evaluation, there's some paperwork and forms that, informed consent the parent has to sign. They're already going to be bored at the end. So I don't want them to be bored at the beginning. I want to have them engaged.
Right.
Another one of the things that, in terms of parents being a little bit apprehensive as well, there's some psychology involved when dealing with children and when dealing with potentially anxious parents. And, one of them is, we know that depending on the amount that we're correcting, the child may not be coming in seeing very well at their day one visit at all. If we're correcting somebody who's a -6, they're probably not going to be 20/20 at day one. They're probably going to be somewhere, probably get maybe about 60 to 70% of it in the first day. We might get more. And parents will worry, oh, wait, they're not seeing well. So we make sure we tell them what to expect. If they're a low correction and I think they'll see well, I'll tell them, hey, I think they'll see pretty well first day. And if they're not, I'll say, hey, they're not going to be clear, but they'll be clearer. And just a matter of when things are going well, just make sure that I exude that sense that things are going well. We've corrected 60+% of their prescription in one night, and it's centered really well, and the cornea looks nice and healthy, then that's a win. That's 3 for 3 there. And so if they start asking questions, well, why does the right eye see better than the left? You can say, well, we corrected a similar percentage, actually. The right eye had less to correct. The right eye sees a little better. But they're doing well. And so when I'm evaluating them, that one-day visit, and I think the one-day visit is so critically important just in terms of their comfort level that things are going well, I explained to them that there's 3 things we're looking for at a one-day visit, and 20/20 vision is not one of them. If we get it, great, it's a bonus, but we want a healthy cornea. That's why we put the fluorescein in and look. The cornea looks great. We want to see that the lenses we put in centered very well overnight, and tell them, they did. They centered really well. And then we want to make sure that the vision got better, and we reduced the amount of nearsightedness, and we did that too. So we're 3 for 3. We can't ask for anything better. Let's see how you're doing in a week, right? And then if they've had any apprehension, they've tested their vision at home and they've had the kid look across the street and they couldn't see the sign that their parent sees with their glasses or whatever, it diffuses all of that and just lets them know, we're on the right track here. We're doing well. So we'll just kind of keep on keeping on with this treatment.
Gotcha. So what is the secret sauce for starting the conversation with a parent, like just cold? Like you have a standard exam situation, parents involved. How do you educate them? How do you talk about it? And then, walk us through that process.
It's funny. As we do more and more Ortho-K, I never know who's going to be sitting in the chair in terms of the child and the parent, because there's the half of them that they've never heard of Ortho-K. And when you explain it, it sounds like magic.
Right.
And then there's the other half that they've done their research. They know about Ortho-K. They're just waiting for me to say it. Maybe they found on the website that I do that and they already knew that coming in, or maybe we've seen one of their friends and they've been referred and they just haven't divulged that yet, right? But the first piece of information I like to throw out there is your child's nearsighted. And what that means, they can't see well far away, they can't up close, and more often than not, the parent's nearsighted, so they know what it means. And the next thing I let them know is kids who are nearsighted get more nearsighted. It'd be nice if they didn't, but they do. I mean, they basically all do, like it's their job. They get more nearsighted. So that's not a great thing. We'd love to limit that and keep that prescription lower. And then that's where I kind of go into, because there's a health aspect too, right? It's not just having a thicker pair of glasses. I would love for them to be less dependent on glasses, but the bigger reason is a less nearsighted eye is a much healthier eye.
Hmm.
And we've got some posters in the office. So, they're getting little bits and pieces of this before they see me, explaining that nearsightedness gets worse and, that there's things we can do to slow it down. And then I'll let them know, but the difference now, as opposed to when I was growing up, is that we actually can do something about it, right? We have methods that are really, really successful in slowing down that progression. And we'd certainly never make a guarantee to you that we can stop it altogether, but we can slow it down quite a bit. And in some cases, we really do grind it to pretty close to a halt. So, and then I can launch into the different methods. And depending on the child, sometimes it's obvious one is the best option for them. And then other times, it might be a little bit more of a discussion there. I make it clear to them, we can't permanently reverse their nearsightedness. If they're already a 3, they're not going to be less than that. But we have a great deal of control over, keeping a child who's a moderate myope from becoming a really high myope. And the newer research shows that every single diopter matters in terms of their risk. So I don't go too heavy into the risk because I don't want to create, like I'm fear mongering or something like that. But they need to know. They need to know that, yes, a more nearsighted person does have a much higher risk of retinal tears and retinal detachments and certain types of cataracts and, myopic maculopathy and things like that. And it's clear and it's proven and we know that. And more importantly, we know that we have options to do something about it. So the trick is really getting that conversation in a regular routine exam that wasn't scheduled as a myopia control consult. It's their regular exam. So I try to tag team with, I have a myopia control coordinator, and I try to tag team with her a little bit. I'll have that initial conversation.
Okay.
Let them know, there's things we can do and that I think their child would be a great candidate. And I throw in right off the bat that it's more expensive than glasses because, they should know that, right? But I think it's a great option, and it's what I do for my kids, and I think it's a really good option. And then I hand them off to my coordinator to kind of, give them one of the brochures about the options we have. And we have one that we made, custom for our office with, what we call orthokeratology in our office and some of the different things that they need to know about progressive myopia. And then they can kind of take it from there. And if they want to go ahead and schedule a consult, they can do that. If they don't want to schedule a consult, they're just not comfortable. A lot of times we'll schedule them to come back in like 6 months, do a refraction, check to see if there's been any progression. That gives them time to think about it, but doesn't let them completely forget about it. And so, life gets busy. People forget things, right? It's important, but they've also got a lot of other important things. Their kids getting braces and work got busy. And there's a pandemic, right? I find more often than not, parents are interested in a consult and patients are kind of on board to some degree. But if they're not comfortable, if they just say, hey, you know what? I don't know that I got it in the budget. I don't know that I can do that. We can always schedule them to have just a real quick recheck of their vision and recheck of their prescription and not go a whole year. Do something sooner than that just to kind of bring it back front of mind.
Okay. Yeah. And you said myopia control coordinator, which I absolutely love. Can you go more into that? So that people can get an idea of that part of your whole office experience and your staff?
Yeah, well, I realized early on, or maybe not early on, as soon as we started to get busier with it, right? And I've been fortunate enough to be in a good area for myopia control. It's fairly affluent. It's intelligent parents that understand the conversation, that do their own research, which their own research helps. It doesn't hurt. It helps. And then, we also have a high Asian population, and there's just a greater awareness in the Asian community. It's been, forefront in China, for example, a lot longer than it has here in the U.S. So I get questions about it before I've even had a chance to bring it up in those cases. And as we got busier, what I realized is this is new for so many patients and so many parents. The volume of questions they have compared to our standard, just come in for your annual eye exam, they have a lot of questions, and they need some hand-holding is the best word I could give for it. They need a reassurance here and there. They need a cheerleader here and there. They need some questions answered, and if we leave it up to just whoever happens to answer the phone, it's really difficult to have the level of training across every staff member to answer those questions the way I want them answered. But if we have a coordinator, I can kind of put together a frequently asked questions list for their reference, and I can have a meeting with them here and there. And it's the same person bringing me a question. If they get a question they don't know the answer to, it's not everyone in the office. It's the same person bringing me that question. So they learn the answer to that question, right? And then gradually over time, they can answer most of them. And I'll tell the parents that. I said, this is Sarah. Here's her business card. I introduce her. I say, if you have questions, if you have concerns, call, ask for Sarah. And chances are she knows the answer. And if you manage to stump her, then she'll bring it to me. Congrats if you manage to stump her. She's been doing it for a little while and she's not stumped that often. And so, it just lets me have a go-to. It's one person to track the orders for the lenses that we make, make sure we received them when we're supposed to, make sure that they get dispensed to the child and they're scheduled for their follow-up if they need one. And somebody loses one, to take the phone call and coordinate the order for a replacement and keep that separate from just the regular soft contact lenses. And I have a different technician that does that.
I love it. because we often talk about the importance of having your staff be an important part of the process. And your whole structure is only as strong as the one person who, the patient's parents were like, oh, by the way, you've already seen them, you're on to the next person. And they say, oh, I have this question. And it's like, you need your staff to be able to pick up and, answer those questions and work with them and be knowledgeable on it. So I love the idea of having a dedicated coordinator, a dedicated person who can be that extra step in the process and help the patients learn more and feel more comfortable about it. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
And there's a lot of good resources for that too. So this is the second coordinator I've had. The first one I had retired, but I had brought her to Vision by Design, the boot camp for staff, and she had gotten a bunch out of that. And then the plan was to do the same with this one this year. We didn't plan on coronavirus, but we'll have another one in some format in the future, right? But there's resources out there. And then as a doctor, what the top 20 questions, if you sit down and think about it, that you get from patients. So, it's easy to put together a starting point for them. And then over time, they kind of build a little reference folder for themselves. I'm pleasantly surprised at times when I hear her explain something that I really thought I would have to be the one explaining and doing a really nice job with it. And it also doesn't hurt that I fit her in Ortho-K. So she's gone through the process now.
Yeah, exactly.
She's a low correction and she doesn't wear it every night, but she's gone through the process and knows how it works. She knows how they feel. And it adds that personal element, which you can say, oh yeah, well, when I do it, I always make sure I put the right one in first. And then I go to the end, things like that. It resonates. It's kind of like just a buddy telling you how they do it, except she's a more official title for it.
That's such a great point. Because if I'm ever out pre-pandemic, of course, at a bar or a party or whatever the case may be, and I talk to somebody about Ortho-K, one of the first questions I get is, do you do it? And when I first started working for the Academy, back when we were the Ortho-Keratology Academy of America, one of the things I said to Carrie is I said, I want to see what this is about. My correction is very minimal. I don't need Ortho-K lenses, but I was like, let's get some lenses. Let's put them in the eye. I want to sleep in them. I want to see what this is all about, because how am I supposed to work to represent and help eye doctors learn how to do this if I don't know anything about it? And so it's paid off in spades when I talk to somebody in a social situation and they say, well, do you do it? And I said, well, I used to do it. I don't need the lenses, but I wanted to see what it was all about. And then they can say, well, how does it feel on your eyes? And I can give them an example. Or, what was it like to sleep in it? And I was like, it's surprisingly comfortable. Like, you just need to get used to the idea that you have something on your eye. And then when you close your lids and go to sleep, it's actually not an issue. And you get used to it really fast. And there's just that, I don't know, I don't want to call it like mistrust, but it's more reassuring when you are talking to somebody who's actually done it or knows what they're talking about. So I absolutely love that.
Absolutely. And it's one of the other things that I wanted to mention too is, you mentioned earlier, what if you have somebody who's really struggling? I take that a little further. What if you have a patient who just simply can't do it, right? And they come up once in a while. They're not common, fortunately, but they come up once in a while. They're just, you can't get near their eye, right? Fortunately, it's not that many of them, but you can make that a success too.
Mm-hmm.
Ortho-K isn't the only way to do myopia control. There's soft lenses. If they're just way too aware, there's MySight, there's the natural view, there's some soft lenses out there, and there's atropine, right? And I do a lot more Ortho-K than I do those other methods, but I want them in my arsenal, right? It's hard to imagine a child that you can't do any form of myopia control on. I don't think I've encountered one. So, you just kind of switch gears. You say, that she's really struggling with this right now. And, you can tell the parent isn't quite sure they want to move forward. And you can say, hey, we're going to do a different format, right? Maybe it's a young child. Maybe we do atropine for a year and monitor them every 4 months and, check their axial length every 4 months and monitor them. And then you get to their next year and they've been putting drops in every single night for a year. They might be way more comfortable around their eye. And, they've learned that maybe they don't want to wear glasses every day and things like that. So it's always important. I guess it should be obvious, but it's always important. You don't want the child to feel like they failed at something.
Right.
They're just not in the right place to go through with it right now. So, and I always kind of turn my conversation with the patient and to the parents back around to, okay, this isn't going to be the way that we're going to help your child today. But this other way we can help your child today, and we can still have a really good outcome. And fortunately, we have a lot of successful methods to do myopia control, and that's one of the great things about this day and age, where there's been so much research into it now, and there's different options that weren't around maybe in the early days of Ortho-K.
Well said. Well said. Well, I'm really glad that we had you on the podcast, and I'm going to put a link to your article that we sent out in our newsletter. We're also going to put it on the AAOMC blog that's on our website. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes for this episode for people to check out. And if anybody's interested in finding out more about you or getting in touch with you, where can you be found on the internet, Dwight?
The easiest way to get in touch with me, you can email me at drdwight@caryfamilyeyecare.com. So that's DRDWIGHT @caryfamilyeyecare.com, and that is spelled CARY, which is the city that we're in. And then so through our website, which is www.caryfamilyeyecare.com. And so, if anybody's got any questions, absolutely shoot them on over, and I will do my best to answer them if I can.
Fantastic. And if you want to find out more about the Academy, we're at orthokacademy.com. You just click on that practitioner button that takes us right to the practitioner version of our website. If you, the listener, have any questions for Dwight or about anything in this episode, you can send those to thecorrectedview@gmail.com. And Dwight brought up the staff boot camp that's at Vision by Design. And unfortunately, we weren't able to have a Vision by Design due to the pandemic. But what we are working on is we're trying to see if it's feasible to do a video on demand version of our boot camp, because there's a lot of people that were interested in attending it. And we've been debating adding that staff component. And it sounds like that might be something that we should throw into the mix. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely reach out and let us know. And Dwight, would love to have you back on the podcast in the future. I'm sure there's many different things we could pick your brain about. And thank you so much for writing the article. And
Sure.
We'll talk to you next time. Thanks.
All right. Thanks.
Well, that's it for this episode of The Corrected View. Remember that this is a community-based podcast. So it's not my opinions about myopia control that are the ones that count, but yours. So let us know what you think by emailing the podcast at thecorrectedview@gmail.com.